He read the same novel for 10 years. Every single chapter. Every single update. He was the only person on the entire planet who read it all the way to the end. And then one day, the world inside that novel became real. The monsters were real. The apocalypse was real. The death was real. And Kim Dokja was the only human being alive who already knew exactly how it was going to end. This is Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. The full story. And I'm warning you right now, nothing you've seen in isekai, in cultivation fiction, in dark fantasy, nothing prepares you for what this novel actually does to you. But to understand why ORV hits differently from every other story in this genre, we need to start with the meta layer, because ORV isn't just a story about a guy surviving an apocalypse. It's a story about what it means to be a reader. What it means to love a story so much that it becomes the most important thing in your life. And what happens when the author of that story decides to use you, the reader, as the final piece of a cosmic game that's been running for billions of years. So let's go back. All the way back to the beginning. Kim Dokja is 28 years old. He works a dead-end office job in Seoul. He has no close friends, no romantic partner, a complicated relationship with his mother, and one singular obsession, a web novel called 3 Ways to Survive in a Ruined World, written by an author known only as TLS-123. He's been reading this novel for a decade. He's left thousands of comments. He knows the plot, the characters, the power system, the hidden lore, all of it. And on the day the final chapter drops, the world ends. It starts on the subway. A system message appears in everyone's field of vision, a blue interface, like a game notification, announcing that a scenario has begun. Monsters erupt. People die. Panic spreads instantly. But Kim Dokja doesn't panic. Because he's read this exact scene. He knows what the monsters are. He knows which subway car is safe. He knows exactly what to do in the next 60 seconds to survive. And so he does. While everyone around him is screaming, Kim Dokja is calm, because he's the only person alive who already knows the story. Now here's the world building you need to understand, because ORV's system is one of the most complicated ever put to page. The apocalypse isn't random. It's orchestrated by entities called Constellations, ancient, godlike beings who exist outside the physical universe, watching humanity's struggle for survival the way we watch a TV show. They place bets. They sponsor humans they find interesting. They grant power in exchange for what the system calls coins, a currency generated by the drama, the suffering, and the narrative worth of human actions. The more compelling your story, the more coins you generate, the more powerful you become. Survival isn't just physical. It's narrative. And the novel Kim Dokja read, 3 Ways to Survive in a Ruined World, is the story of one man working through this exact apocalypse. That man is Yoo Joonghyuk, the protagonist of the novel. A cold, ruthless, supremely talented regressor who has lived through this apocalypse over and over again, dying, resetting, coming back stronger each time. By the time the novel's story begins, Yoo Joonghyuk is on his 3rd regression. He's already died twice trying to save the world. He knows the scenarios. He knows the enemies. He's the most powerful human alive. And Kim Dokja knows everything about him, his trauma, his secrets, his weaknesses, the moments he nearly broke. Kim Dokja knows Yoo Joonghyuk better than Yoo Joonghyuk knows himself. So Kim Dokja finds Yoo Joonghyuk. And this first meeting is everything. Because Yoo Joonghyuk, in the novel, is a lone wolf. He doesn't trust people. He doesn't need them. He's survived 2 full apocalypses mostly alone. But Kim Dokja walks up to him and starts telling him things he shouldn't know. Future events. Hidden traps. the exact location of items Yoo Joonghyuk was going to spend weeks searching for. And Yoo Joonghyuk, who has seen everything, who trusts no one, is genuinely unsettled. He can't figure out what Kim Dokja is. Is he an enemy? A prophet? A Constellations agent? And Kim Dokja, for his part, doesn't tell him the truth. Not yet. Because the truth is insane. Early in the story, Kim Dokja assembles what will become his core group, the people who will walk this apocalypse with him. There's Young Hee-won, a fierce and morally driven fighter who becomes one of the story's most beloved characters. Lee Hyun-sung, a gentle giant of a man, a former soldier whose loyalty runs bone deep. Lee Gil-young, a child with the ability to command insects, and yes, that sounds strange, but it becomes terrifying. And Shin Yu-sung, another child, who controls plants. These kids shouldn't be in an apocalypse. The fact that they are, and what that does to Kim Dokja emotionally, is one of the story's quiet devastations. Now, the Constellations. I need to spend a moment here because they're not just a power system. They're characters. The Constellations watching Kim Dokja's story are drawn to him immediately, not because he's the strongest, but because he's the most interesting. He's unpredictable. He does things the novel's protagonist never did. He creates scenarios the Constellations have never seen before. And in a universe where these godlike beings literally consume narrative for sustenance. Kim Dokja is a 5-star meal. The most important constellation in Kim Dokja's story is one called the Secretive Plotter. A mysterious figure who watches from the shadows, never intervening directly, always present. And the identity of the Secretive Plotter is one of ORV's greatest long-game reveals. The scenarios escalate fast. Each one is essentially a dungeon, a structured challenge the system forces humanity to complete, with death as the penalty for failure. Kim Dokja uses his novel knowledge to navigate them, but here's the thing the story makes clear early on: the novel he read didn't cover everything. There are gaps. Events that happened off-page. Characters the novel's narrator, Yoo Joonghyuk, never noticed because he was too focused on survival. Kim Dokja is filling in those gaps in real time. And sometimes, he fills them in ways that change the story entirely. Because Kim Dokja isn't just reading anymore. He's writing. One of the earliest gut-punch moments in ORV is when Kim Dokja realizes something terrifying about his own position in the story. In the novel, there was a character, a minor character, barely named, who appeared briefly in the early chapters and then died. A character who helped Yoo Joonghyuk in the beginning and then disappeared from the narrative. Kim Dokja realizes, with creeping horror, that he is that character. He is the unnamed, forgettable side character who was always meant to die early and be forgotten. The novel's protagonist was never him. He was never supposed to survive this long. And the universe, the system, the constellations, the cosmic machinery, is starting to notice the anomaly. But Kim Dokja doesn't run from this. He leans into it. And this is where his character becomes genuinely extraordinary, because Kim Dokja's response to learning he's supposed to be a disposable side character is to decide, quietly and with absolute conviction, that he's going to be the most important side character who ever lived. He's not trying to become the protagonist. He doesn't want Yoo Joonghyuk's role. He wants to be the person who makes the protagonist's story possible. The supporter. The one who knows the ending and works backward from it. There's something deeply moving about a man who reads himself as a footnote and chooses to make that footnote matter. Now let's talk about Kim Dokja's power, because it's one of the most unique in the genre. His primary ability is called Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. It lets him access the inner thoughts and feelings of people around him, essentially reading them like novel characters. He can see their stats, their hidden emotions, their true motivations. It's an incredibly intimate power. And it's also a curse. Because Kim Dokja can see how much people are suffering and hiding it. He can see the fear underneath Young Hee-won's anger. He can see the loneliness underneath Yoo Joonghyuk's coldness. He knows everyone's pain, and he carries it with him, quietly, without telling them he knows. His second major power, and this one takes time to develop, is called Fourth Wall. And this is where ORV starts doing something genuinely unprecedented in the genre. The Fourth Wall ability lets Kim Dokja interact with the readers of his story. Not the constellations watching him, but the actual readers. The people in the real world reading about his life. Us. The novel explicitly acknowledges that Kim Dokja's story is being read by people outside his universe, and his power lets him draw strength from their attention, their investment, their emotional engagement with his narrative. The more people care about Kim Dokja's story, the stronger he becomes. It's a power that literally runs on love. Let's talk about the relationship between Kim Dokja and Yoo Joonghyuk, because it's the spine of this entire story, and it's one of the most complex dynamics in modern Korean fiction. Yoo Joonghyuk, remember, has died twice already. He's regressed. He's seen people he loved die over and over. He's built walls so thick that warmth can barely reach him anymore. And then Kim Dokja shows up, this strange, infuriating man who knows things he shouldn't, who refuses to explain himself, who keeps saving people in ways that make no tactical sense, who treats Yoo Joonghyuk not as a weapon or a protagonist but as a person with wounds that deserve acknowledgement. Yoo Joonghyuk doesn't know what to do with that. The story doesn't rush their dynamic. It lets it build across hundreds of chapters, moments of grudging respect, flashes of genuine fury, times when Yoo Joonghyuk has to save Kim Dokja and is clearly angrier about how much he cares than about the danger itself. There's a scene, and I won't give full context yet because it hits harder when you understand the stakes, where Yoo Joonghyuk, who has watched Kim Dokja do something catastrophically self-sacrificial, grabs him and says something that cracks through every wall he's built. It's not a love confession. It's not a friendship speech. It's just the truth, raw and furious, from a man who doesn't know how to say he's afraid of losing someone. ORV does this constantly. It earns every emotional moment. Around the midpoint of the story, ORV reveals the true scale of what's happening, and this is where the narrative shifts from apocalypse survival story to something genuinely cosmic. The scenarios aren't just a game the Constellations invented. They're part of a much older system, a cycle that has been running across countless worlds, countless civilizations, for billions of years. Each world that goes through the scenarios either succeeds, producing powerful enough beings to join the ranks of the Constellations, or fails, and is consumed. Earth is just the latest world in an endless cycle of testing and destruction. And the entity running this cycle, the true antagonist of ORV, is something called the Outer God. A being so vast and so alien that even the Constellations fear it. But here's the layer that makes ORV genuinely different from every other story in this genre. The novel Kim Dokja read. 3 Ways to Survive in a Ruined World wasn't just a web novel. The author, TLS 123, knew the future. The author wrote a story that was also a survival guide, encoded with the exact knowledge needed to beat the scenarios. And the author wrote it specifically so that one reader, the right reader, would absorb it, would love it, would finish it, and would be ready when the apocalypse came. The novel was a message. And Kim Dokja was always the intended recipient. The question that haunts the entire second half of ORV is, who is TLS 123? And why did they choose Kim Dokja? The answer, when it comes, is devastating. TLS 123 is Yoo Joonghyuk. A future version of Yoo Joonghyuk, from a regression so far advanced that he'd already lived through the apocalypse dozens of times, had already seen every possible path to victory, and had concluded that the only way to save the world was to create a reader. to write a novel that would produce Kim Dokja. He went back, impossibly far back, and wrote the story of his own life, knowing that somewhere in the future, a lowly man sitting on a subway would read it and fall in love with it and become the one person who could change the ending. Yoo Joonghyuk wrote Kim Dokja into existence. And Kim Dokja spent 10 years loving a novel written by the man who needed him most. Take a second with that. Because ORV just did something almost no story does, it made the backstory of the relationship between its two leads retroactively reframe everything. Every chapter you read where Kim Dokja quoted the novel, every moment he said, "I know this because I read it," that was him quoting Yoo Joonghyuk's own memories back to him. Every time Kim Dokja said, "the protagonist of my favorite novel," he was talking about the man standing next to him. And Yoo Joonghyuk, in the present timeline, doesn't remember writing it. The regression erased those memories. So he's meeting the reader of a novel he doesn't remember writing, who knows him more intimately than anyone alive, who loves a version of him that doesn't exist anymore. It's beautiful and it's brutal. Now let's hit some of the major scenario arcs, because ORV's middle section is where the world building explodes and the stakes become genuinely incomprehensible. The Han River scenario. The Flood Myth scenario. The Demon King of Salvation arc, where Kim Dokja, in a move that is equal parts brilliant and suicidal, takes on the role of a demon king to protect his companions from a scenario designed to force humanity to produce a villain. He becomes the villain of his own story, deliberately, so that the people he loves don't have to. He wears the title of Great Demon King and absorbs the hatred of the entire world, and he does it with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. The Demon King arc is where ORV's thematic core crystallizes. Kim Dokja has a pattern, and his companions start to notice it. He puts himself in the worst position so others don't have to. He takes the role no one wants. He absorbs consequences that should be distributed across everyone. And he does it quietly, without asking for recognition, often without telling anyone what he's actually doing. Young Hyewon confronts him about it at one point, furious, genuinely hurt, because she realizes that Kim Dokja doesn't think of himself as someone worth protecting. He thinks of himself as a resource. A tool for getting the people he loves to the ending safely. And the tragedy is that he's so good at it that everyone lets him. Let's talk about the Constellations more specifically, because some of them become genuine characters in this story. There's the Dakibi, the system administrators who run the scenarios and who are more morally complicated than they first appear. There's the constellation known as Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, a terrifying entity who becomes one of Kim Dokja's most unexpected sponsors. There's Prisoner of the Golden Headband, yes, that's Sun Wukong, the Monkey King from Journey to the West, rendered here as a constellation of almost incomprehensible power and chaotic energy. ORV pulls from Chinese mythology, Korean folklore, Greek legend, Norse cosmology, and it does it with enough specificity that each mythological figure feels like a real character with a real history, not just a name drop. One of the most important constellation relationships in the story is between Kim Dokja and the entity called Baehyung, a Dakibi who starts as essentially a game show host for the scenarios and slowly becomes something much more complex. And there's Han Sooyoung, a human character who is one of the most fascinating in the entire novel. She's a writer. She's brilliant, cutting, morally ambiguous, and she figures out Kim Dokja's secret faster than almost anyone. She knows he's reading from a novel. And her response to this information is not shock or awe, it's fury, because she's a writer, and she immediately understands the implications of what it means for someone to be living inside a story someone else wrote. Han Sooyoung becomes one of Kim Dokja's most important companions, and one of his most important mirrors. Because she's also a person who understands stories. Who thinks in narrative. Who sees the world as text to be analyzed and rewritten. In many ways, she's the closest thing Kim Dokja has to an intellectual equal in this story. And she's also the person most capable of seeing what he's doing to himself, the slow, deliberate self-erasure of a man who has decided that his purpose is to serve the story, not to live in it. Their dynamic is one of the sharpest in the novel, two people who understand each other completely and are both terrified of what that understanding means. Now we need to talk about the Secretive Plotter reveal, because it's one of the most emotionally complex moments in the entire story. The Secretive Plotter has been watching Kim Dokja since the very beginning. A shadowy constellation who never sponsors him directly, never intervenes openly, but is always present. Always watching. And the reveal of who this entity is, I'll say it plainly, is a future version of Kim Dokja himself. A version of Kim Dokja who survived, who ascended to constellation status, who then traveled back through time to watch over his younger self. Not to change things. Not to intervene. Just to watch. Just to be there. Because the future Kim Dokja knows what the younger one is going through, knows how alone he feels, and can't do anything except witness it. Think about what that means. Kim Dokja, a man who spent his whole life reading other people's stories because he felt like he had no story of his own, becomes so important that a future version of himself dedicates an eternity to watching over the past. He becomes the protagonist of his own story and then goes back to be the reader of it. The roles collapse into each other. The reader becomes the character, becomes the author, becomes the reader again. It's a loop of love and loneliness so perfectly constructed that when you understand it fully, it's almost impossible to process. ORV is doing literary theory through apocalypse fiction, and it works. The final act of ORV escalates to a scale that's genuinely hard to describe. The outer god, the entity consuming worlds, is revealed in its full horror. It's not a villain with a plan. It's not a tyrant with a throne. It's something older and more terrible, a force of pure consumption that has been running the scenario system as a harvesting mechanism, feeding on the narrative energy produced by civilizations struggling to survive. Every story ever told in every world that ever existed has been food for this thing. And the only way to stop it is to produce a story so powerful, so resonant, so cosmically significant that it breaks the cycle entirely. The weapon against the outer god is narrative itself. And Kim Dokja, the reader, the side character, the man who loved his story more than anyone, is the one who has to wield it. The final battle of ORV isn't a sword fight. It's not a power level comparison. It's Kim Dokja standing at the end of everything and using the fourth wall, his connection to every reader who ever cared about his story, to generate enough narrative force to rewrite the ending of the universe. He calls on the readers. He calls on everyone who followed his journey, who laughed at his terrible jokes, who cried when he almost died, who stayed up too late reading just one more chapter. And they answer. Because that's what readers do. They show up for the stories they love. And Kim Dokja, who spent his whole life showing up for a story, finally has a story that shows up for him. But ORV doesn't let Kim Dokja win cleanly. Because that's not who he is, and the story knows it. The cost of using the fourth wall at full power, of channeling the love of every reader across every world, is that Kim Dokja disappears. He's erased from the story. Not killed, erased. The people he loves forget him. The world continues without him. Yoo Joonghyuk survives. Young Hee-won survives. The children survive. Everyone Kim Dokja spent the entire story protecting, they live. And they don't remember why. They don't remember him. He gets the ending he always wanted for them. And he's not there to see it. It is the most Kim Dokja thing that could possibly happen. Except Yoo Joonghyuk remembers. Because Yoo Joonghyuk is a regressor. Because the mechanism of regression means some memories persist across resets. Because the future version of Yoo Joonghyuk who wrote the novel, who created Kim Dokja, left something behind in the current Yoo Joonghyuk that can't be erased. A thread. A name. A face. And Yoo Joonghyuk, who has survived the apocalypse, who has watched the world be saved by someone no one else can remember, goes looking. He searches through a world that has no record of Kim Dokja's existence, following a feeling he can't explain, chasing a ghost that the universe insists never existed. And he finds him. The ending of ORV is quiet. After everything, the cosmic horror, the divine politics, the apocalypse, the sacrifice, it ends quietly. Yoo Joonghyuk finds Kim Dokja in a small, ordinary space. And they just talk. Like two people who have been through something no one else will ever understand. The story doesn't give them a triumphant reunion scene with dramatic music. It gives them a moment of genuine rest. Two people who carried impossible weight, finally setting it down. And the final line of the novel, the last words Kim Dokja speaks, are addressed directly to the reader. To you. To everyone who read the story. He thanks you. For reading. For caring. For making his story matter enough to save the world. So what is Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint actually about? On the surface, apocalypse survival, cultivation adjacent power systems, cosmic gods, regression mechanics. But underneath all of that, ORV is about what stories do to people. What it means to love a story so much that it becomes part of your identity. What it means to be a reader, to give your attention, your emotion, your time to a narrative that exists outside you. Kim Dokja's entire journey is a meditation on readership as an act of love. And the story's answer, its final, beautiful, devastating answer, is that the love readers give to stories is real. It has weight. It has power. It can, in the right circumstances, save everything. ORV was written by two authors. Sing Shong, a collaborative pen name, and it ran from 2018 to 2020 on the Korean web novel platform Munpia. It has since been adapted into a webtoon that's absolutely stunning, and as of 2026, the live-action adaptation is in production, which is why you're hearing about it everywhere right now. If you're coming to ORV through the adaptation buzz, I want to tell you something clearly: read the novel. Or read the webtoon. Experience it in a form where you can feel Kim Dokja's internal voice, because so much of what makes this story extraordinary lives in his narration, in the way he sees the world, in the gap between what he says and what he feels, in the quiet devastation of a man who knows too much and loves too deeply. And look. I know I've covered a lot today. We went from a soul subway to the end of the universe. We talked about regression mechanics and constellation politics and the fourth wall as a literal superpower. But I want to leave you with the thing that makes ORV stick. It's not the power system. It's not the plot twists, as brilliant as they are. It's Kim Dokja himself. A lonely man who found meaning in a story. Who was so changed by reading that he became capable of saving the world. Who, at the very end, got to tell the readers of his story that they mattered. That their attention was an act of grace. That being a reader, just a reader, nothing more, was enough to make a difference in the cosmos. I don't know about you, but that one got me. If you want to go deeper, the webtoon covers the early arcs beautifully, and the art during the constellation sequences is genuinely jaw-dropping. The novel translation is available in English, and I'd recommend starting there for the full internal monologue experience. Next time on this channel, we're going deep on another story that does something structurally insane with its protagonist, one that I think ORV fans specifically are going to lose their minds over. Stay close. And in the meantime, go read something you love. Apparently it might save the universe.